What's up, brothers? Sorry for the late live tonight. If you're in the Midwest, I hope that you're warm because it's ridiculous outside how cold it is. Tomorrow's supposed to be something like -40. Might be a slight exaggeration there, but super cold in Michigan with more snow where I'm at. I've got like 4-foot drifts in my driveway or on the edge of my driveway. Kids did a good job of shoveling today. But yeah, welcome. So tonight we're going to be talking about the difference between headship and leadership. And if this is the first time you're seeing any of the videos on my Mike Your Mentor page, so part of the reason I did this is because I grew up with nothing. I went through some very crazy circumstances, and just reflecting on my life, asking myself, why was I able to do something with my life, right? Like be the first person in my family to graduate from college, have a good job, have a family, raise responsible kids. I don't think I'm special. If it wasn't for the grace of God, for one reason I wouldn't have done it, but the other apparent reason was I had a lot of mentors in my life, a lot of men that I sought out through books and personally. That took me into their homes and showed me, I guess, the secrets, you will, of being a man and what that looks like, and instilling character and helping to build me up. And so I want to do that because men are dying, not just emotionally or emotional deaths, but physical deaths in a lot of cases. Male suicide is on the rise. It's at a level that it's never been at before. And having dealt with suicide in my life personally, it needs to stop. And I'm going to do whatever I can to help play my part. And this is part of that, right? Giving back and sharing the wisdom that I've learned and had instilled in me over the years. So thanks for being here and taking the time. We'll dive right in here. I got this little fancy little photo I made for you guys. So talking about headship versus leadership. So what I'll do is we're going to talk about the differences. Then I want to share a story that was, I guess not a story, but a good illustration of what that looks like that was shared to me by one of my mentors. And then I want to list 5 things that you should consider when it comes to headship, right? So first, with headship, every man is called to headship. We're called to headship by God. And if you saw the video last Friday and the Friday before, we talked about the 4 faces of manhood, and one of those faces, probably one of the biggest faces, is the king face, right? It reflects righteous energy. And then when we skew off to that, certain things happen, which we'll retouch on here in a minute. So every man is called to headship. Headship is an appointment, right? It's an appointment by God. You're appointed to that, and you have a choice whether you're going to accept that or not and walk in that. Headship gives direction, it gives protection, it also gives dedication and blessing over and to others that you have headship over. So your family, right? Your kids, your wife, however your family structure looks like, maybe your stepkids, right? Very important stuff there. So it gives direction, protection, dedication, and blessing. So we talked about that king face and its righteous energy, and when that gets skewed, one of 2 things happen. We either become a tyrant and we're demanding, we're rude, we're selfish, or we go the other way and we become an abdicator, which means that we give up that position. We don't accept that headship and the responsibility that comes with it in our homes, and we walk away from that for lots of different reasons. Maybe we're depressed, maybe we're at a point in our lives where we don't know what to do. We're struggling. Like myself, I found myself at a point in my life where I was lost, and I didn't want to be married. I didn't know if I wanted to be married, I guess is a better way to put it. I was struggling, man, and good thing I was able to get around a group of guys who sewed into me and challenged me with some really hard questions and helped me through that time in my life, because I was about to be an abdicator in my own life, right? So now we're going to talk about what leadership looks like. And leadership is a matter of personality, gifting, and temperament, and that shows up in a lot of different ways and a lot of different combinations between those three things, right? Like some people can be natural leaders and naturally strong leaders. My wife has good, strong leadership skills in her, as do a lot of other women and a lot of other people I know. And then there's people that are, I guess, quiet leaders. Maybe they don't say much, but they do a lot. They walk the walk. They just don't talk the talk very much. And then obviously there's people who aren't leaders, posers, I guess. So to reiterate, a woman can be a strong leader. Should learn how to read. All right. And so as a husband, right, a smart husband will appreciate these gifts. And if his wife is a strong leader, he'll release her and encourage her in that leadership, and he won't be intimidated by it, which I think a lot of men are, and a lot of men can be, because they don't know how to handle that strong leadership from a female, and it creates this dynamic too, right? Like especially if a woman lets her gift of leadership get out of control and become rebellious and bitter and discouraging, maybe towards her husband, that creates a lot of confusion. So I want to share a little illustration with you here that was shared to me by a mentor of mine. His name is Scott Prickett. Just a little plug for him because he's a great guy. He wrote this book called Abundant and Free, and I highly recommend it, that you read it. It's on Amazon, maybe for like $7-8. Don't quote me, but it's an awesome book. And Scott is a tremendous leader. He's got a tremendous story, and I've had the privilege of serving with him on a couple of men's retreats for a thing called The Quest, which is extremely powerful. So I encourage that. And this comes directly from him, this illustration. So part of Scott's story was he was in the Army, and he was, I don't know what the official position was, but he was a tank commander. And he was explaining to us, or giving us an illustration one night at this retreat of what headship looks like. And if you've ever seen the movie Fury, with Brad Pitt, there's a scene where they roll into town, and I think there was 4 tanks, right? And there's some formation that this was called, and Scott said what it was, but I don't remember. But right, you get this picture of these 4 tanks, right? One right after another, and they roll into this town in the movie, and they just get completely ambushed. I mean, it's crazy the amount of hits and stuff they take. Well, what you don't know is the tank commander rides in the very first tank. And the people, or the tank commander and the other guys in the tank, if you're in that first tank, you know that if you come on some enemy combatants or you go into a firefight, it's more than likely that you're going to die. And you're okay with that because that's what you signed up for. Like the job of the first tank is to draw the fire and to take all the hits, right? And headship is like that, right? Like we're called as men to take the hits, right? To do what's right and what's best for our family. and that looks like a lot of different things. And I'll go over 5 of those things here in a little bit. But I just thought that that was an awesome picture that he drew in our minds of what headship looks like, right? Like you're willing to die for the people that you've been entrusted over, right? So our family, our kids, right? Even our neighbors, right? In our community, our fellow co-workers at work, and you see a lot of that, a lot of the opposite in society, it used to be kind of a thing growing up, right? Like if you were a man, like you ran towards the fire, you ran towards the problem, and inserted yourself to help those who couldn't help themselves. Whereas now you could probably argue that it's just the opposite. People run away from the situation because they don't want to take responsibility. They don't want to answer that higher calling. They're not willing to lay down their lives for others. And we see that in society, and it's one of my biggest pet peeves is like the 4th of July when the veterans walk down the street and people won't clap, they won't stand up, they won't show their respect for whether you believe in war or not, right? These guys put their lives on the line for us. And we can't stand up and acknowledge that. So that's a different story for another time. So I'll get off my soapbox about that. But so here's 5 ways that headship could look like in your life. The first one, I suggest that you know God intimately. You don't just know about God, right? Like people know the Bible a little bit, maybe know a little bit about the Bible. They may know a little bit of the stories in the Bible, but do you really take the time to seek after God and have an actual heart-to-heart relationship with Him? Because you can do that. God will speak to you in a lot of different ways. It could be audibly. I've heard God's audible voice twice in my life. I'll be sharing some of those stories on the Sunday sermon. And then in other ways, God speaks to me as He gives me pictures in my mind or puts things on my heart. And it's a process, right, to learn to hear God's voice and to know what He's asking you to do or not. And we can talk about that further in the weeks to come if it comes up. But I just want to encourage you, right? Know God intimately, because it's your job as a man to make a way, which is the second thing, for your family to know God intimately, your wife to know God intimately, your kids to know God intimately. And I'm a firm believer that when we die, we're going to stand before God, and God's going to hold us accountable for that, right? That's part of the headship. Did we make a way for our family and our kids to have an intimate relationship with God and know truly who He is and how He cares about us, right? And what that looks like. The third thing, or the third way that headship plays out is you think, what would she like first, right? And this is in relationship to your wife, right? You don't think, oh, well, if it's date night, what would I like to do? Right? No, you think, what would my wife like to do? Right? And then we got Valentine's Day coming up here in a little bit. Like, how well do you know your wife? Do you get her the same thing every year? Or do you actually like study your wife and know all the little different things that she likes? What really makes her day? You know what? And if you do get her the same thing every year, and that's what I guess that's what really speaks her love language, then that's great. But I know some guys, their wife's love language, or their wife's love language is gifts, receiving gifts, and maybe they just want a bouquet of flowers, and for whatever reason, these guys won't get their wives a simple bouquet of flowers, right? We all have our stuff, right, that we got to deal with, but how well do you know your wife? How well do you know what she likes, and what length are you willing to go to express that? And I don't think that you have to spend a lot of money to get that done, because I believe that the simple but thoughtful things are way more meaningful than just buying something super extravagant and saying here you go, So I want to encourage you, study your wife, and then think, what would she like first, right? We're called to lay down our lives for our wives. The fourth thing, you take the hit, right? And that could look like a lot of different things. One of the biggest things is if you get in an argument, are you going to be the first person to apologize? Or are you going to be stubborn and say, I'm not apologizing until she apologizes to me? Or I'm not apologizing until this thing changes? And I'm not saying that that's right or wrong. I'm just saying, like, right, if you're gonna answer this call to headship, that's what we're called to do, is to take the hit. Be the first person to apologize, whether you think it's right or wrong. And then the fifth and last thing, right, is to die to yourself daily. Oh man, that's so hard. That can be so hard. Even with the little things, I mean, from, I guess I'll just be transparent in my life, from if you're in the middle of doing something, like I get real focused when I'm in my work mode and I'm working on a project, and it's, hey, can you take the dog out? Can you go pick Anthony up, from school, or go here, right? Like sometimes your flesh just, Charles, you're crazy, man. Sometimes, to be real, my flesh just rises up and I'm like, no, I don't want to do that. I'm doing something. I'm busy. But then I got to remind myself, right? Like, am I going to die to myself daily? Am I going to show my wife how much she means to me by willing to set my wants and desires down to help her out, and to make her life easier, right? To add value to her life, to make her life better, not make her life worse, right? And by doing that, I'm modeling to her what that relationship looks like between me and God, right? Because as God fills me up and fills my heart up, I'm able to fill my wife's heart up and fill my kids' hearts up. And then that points them back to God. So I just want to encourage you, brothers. We've been called to headship in our families, and that's a serious responsibility. And if you've been following me and you watch the Friday videos, the authentic manhood videos, we're really going to dive into this, that responsibility piece, right? Because there's four things, right? There's accept responsibility. There's reject passivity. There's lead courageously. And then there's invest eternally, right? Those first three, accept responsibility, reject passivity, and lead courageously, whew, man, those can be hard, especially if you're married to a strong leader. Yeah, we'll just leave it at that for tonight. Those can be hard, but that's not a bad thing, right? We got to learn how to deal with that, how to communicate properly, and part of I guess the model, right, when we're laying our lives down, and showing our wives and our family that we're there to serve them, and to point them back towards God. I'm a firm believer that all things work out. So that's pretty much it for tonight. I hope you enjoyed this little lesson, or these little thoughts on headship versus leadership. And that picture of the tank really just sticks with you the next time you're struggling to lay your pride down, or to do what you've been called to, right? Will you be the lead tank? Will you take the hit? I hope so, brother, because you got it in you. If you're watching this video, I just want to tell you that I'm proud of you, and I appreciate you tuning in, because that tells me that you care about your position as a man. You care about your manhood. You care about the role that you have in your family, and in your community, and at your workplace. And I believe that you have what it takes. So I just want to encourage you and call that out of you, right? It ain't easy. Never said it was going to be easy, right? But we can do it. So have a good night. If you're in the Midwest, stay warm. It's supposed to get real nasty tomorrow again. And we'll see you tomorrow for Wednesday Wisdom. Love you, brothers. Later. Thanks, Charles.